Hey everybody, welcome to Some Things Fishy. If you haven't checked out our channel yet, we've got lots of great videos on everything in the saltwater fish tank realm. Recently, we've been specifically focusing on clownfish. So if you're super interested in learning more about clowns, everything you need to know, we've got it in here. Subscribe, like this video, and comment below, and let's get right into this video. So today, we're going to be talking about the bubble tip anemone, more specifically about like the rose bubble tip anemone. We've got one here, it's kind of popping up on the screen, it's popping up in front of you, what you can see right now. But we love bubble tip anemones. They are gorgeous, to say the least, and clownfish tend to love them. So if you like clownfish, if you've got a couple in your tank or you're thinking about getting clownfish, adding a rose tip or a bubble tip anemone of any kind in your tank is going to be absolutely stunning. The people who come to your house are going to love it. It's never going to get old for you. It is a fantastic anemone to have in your tank, and like I said, clownfish love it. The first thing that I want to say really quickly though is if you're familiar with clownfish, there's different breeds, different types of clowns that you can get on the market. The most common kind of Nemo kind is the ocellaris clown. They're typically what you see in pretty much every store, kind of that orange color, but there's also tons of different types of designer ocellaris clowns that you can get, like the snowflake or other ones that you'll see on the screen as well. Ocellaris clowns in nature don't have like bubble tip anemones, rose bubble tip anemones. I think other clowns like perculas or maybe even the tomato clowns and stuff, I'm not super sure about those, but there are other types of clowns that are naturally inclined to go and host rose bubble tip anemones or bubble tip anemones just because that's what they have in the wild. I believe, I'm not sure off the top of my head what the ocellaris typically have in their natural habitat, but it's not necessarily the bubble tip anemones. So this means that sometimes just because they're not genetically wired to host those bubble tip anemones, they might not, and it might take a little bit of extra work / time to get your ocellaris clowns to host it. But we have a video about how to get your clownfish to host your anemone. There's lots of content, lots of things that you can find online to help influence them, and in the end, it really just does take some time to get them, and it should be fine after some time. I just wanted to let you know though that the main type of clownfish that you see on the market don't necessarily genetically and naturally host bubble tip anemones, but I personally, and my dad, who has lots of experience as well, have never had any issues with getting clownfish to host our bubble tip anemones. So keep that in mind. Might not be the biggest issue, something just to know. The other thing that I would recommend, like another really quick tip or trick, is if you're new to clownfish, or if you're new to saltwater fish tanks, and you have a new tank, you don't want to put your bubble tip anemone in there too soon. I'd say wait 6 to 8 months for your tank, maybe even up to a year, but probably not necessarily that long, just 6 to 8 months before you actually introduce your anemone of any sort, but especially a bubble tip anemone, into your fish tank. That's because there's a lot of chemicals that are still getting balanced out. Your tank has to cycle a lot of things. There's just a lot that goes into having a fish tank, a saltwater fish tank specifically, and you can't, there's some things that are just too touchy, too intermediate level, expert level, that just aren't going to do well in a beginner tank and a new tank. So you really got to let your tank stabilize and get to a really healthy, balanced state before you introduce a rose tip or a bubble tip anemone into your tank. But once you have it in there, it's going to be absolutely fantastic, and you're going to want a couple of clowns to host it, and it's going to be super cool. So I would definitely recommend getting one. One of the things that I love the most about a bubble tip anemone is that they, and this is probably very similar to other anemones, but this one specifically, they, what's the word I'm looking for? They spread like crazy. Like they'll grow and grow and grow and then detach, and then all of a sudden you have 2 or even 3 rose tip, bubble tip anemones in your tank. And what's so cool about it is you can sell those. So my dad, he's had this same anemone in his tank for years over years, and it just keeps dividing and separating. And what my dad does is he just sells off the extras, And that's how he funds his saltwater fish tank hobby at this point. That's how he funds getting more fish and things like that. So the cool thing about these bubble tip anemones is pretty soon, once they start to grow and get to a healthy size, and if your tank is healthy and balanced, they'll spread and they'll divide and they'll start paying for themselves and then start paying for the rest of your tank. So I think that's really awesome. One thing that is a little bit of a con to getting an anemone, especially this type of anemone, is the price. They can be a little bit pricey. Really just depends though. It's hard to give you like an exact price of what they're worth because each website's going to be a little bit different. Each, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, you'll find them on there in places, and it just totally differs. I think my dad sells them from anywhere from, depending on the size, from $50 to $100, which I think is actually a really good deal. I think you can find these for well over 150, maybe even 200. Let me know in the comments. I'd like to see it because I think it depends on your region and what people are selling them for. So let me know in the comments what you've seen these bubble tip anemones go for online, because I'd be curious to do a little price comparison. But I'd expect paying more than you probably want to for one of these, but anywhere between $100 and $200 is likely what you'll see. If you can get anything 100 or less, I think that's a dang good deal. And if it's in good condition, it's a healthy anemone that you can tell, definitely worth it. I think that's a steal. That's a good deal. There's other anemones that can be way more expensive than that. So this is one of the on the relatively cheaper end of anemones. I've seen some anemones in the store that have gone for like $500 and stuff, and there's some corals as well that can just get super expensive. It's not a cheap industry to be in, that's for sure. It's not a cheap hobby. I'm sure you guys and your families and your spouses would agree with that. But yeah, that's what I'd recommend with bubble tip anemones. They're great for your tank. I've never had any issues with them hurting other fish or hurting other corals or anything like that. One thing that I would caution though is you don't want to position it right next to your corals. I don't think that's a really good idea. I think they could cause some damage. And the other thing is they do move quite a bit. They'll get to where they want to get, and they'll get to where they think is the best situation and spot for them. So don't think that you're just going to be able to plop it down or glue it to a rock like you can with some corals and expect it to stay there. It's going to move to where it feels it's going to have the best chance to get food and the best chance to get light and things like that. So yeah, that kind of is a summary of the bubble tip anemone. I love them. I think it's a great purchase. If you're still here watching this video to this point, I'd say yes, good purchase for you. Your clowns are gonna love it. It's gonna be a great addition to your tank. It really pops. It looks so cool in the daytime, and when those nighttime lights hit, oh man, it looks fantastic. So it does shrivel up and get pretty small once it starts getting dark. Keep that in mind. It's not going to be as showy and flashy at nighttime, but it is a great thing to have in your tank. It helps clean up a lot of the extra food floating around that hasn't hit the ground yet. So I think it's a fantastic addition. I think it's worth the money that people are charging for it, and you're going to really love having it. So thanks again for watching. This is Some Things Fishy. Hope you have a great day, and subscribe and like the video, and we'll talk to you next time.